What are the best Kamen Rider movies of all time? Lately, I've been rewatching close to 50 years worth of Kamen Rider movies, and I thought it would be fun to rank my favorite Kamen Rider movies of all time. With so many great Kamen Rider movies, a top 10 just wouldn't cut it. So today we're gonna rank and discuss the top 20 Kamen Rider movies of all time. And with such a long history, we're bound to disagree on a few of these. So let me know what your favorite Kamen Rider movies are in the comments. And without further ado, let's get into it. Number 20 is Kamen Rider Yuki, episode final. This is basically the end of the series, but in an alternate timeline. This was apparently meant to be Toshiki Inoue's ending, whereas the TV show ending was Yasuko Kobayashi's ending. In this film, only 6 riders remain in the Rider War, and we have a relatively heavy story here with a lot of revelations about things that have happened. This is a dark and action-packed movie with a lot of emotion, and there's quite a bit of screen time here for Kamen Rider Fem and Yuga. If you like Kamen Rider Yuki, you're gonna love this movie, and honestly, whenever I'm in the mood to watch Yuki, this is a film that I go back to quite a bit. Next up at number 19 is Oz Dino All Riders Let's Go Kamen Riders. This is a 40th anniversary film and a crossover between Oz Dino and Kamen Rider Ichigo. And as such, it features one of the most likable heroes ever in Eiji, with one of the funniest Toku shows ever in Dino, plus the iconic OG Kamen Rider. This movie currently holds the record for most riders featured in one film, with almost every single rider appearing, save for several movie-exclusive and/or villainous riders. It even features rider-adjacent characters like Kikaida, Inajiman, and Zubat. This film heavily leans on fan service to entertain you, but to be honest, Oz and Dino are such great shows in their own right, and the humor here is pretty entertaining. Another cool thing about this movie is that we see Oz henshin using an Imogen medal as well as a shocker medal, which is obviously pretty unique. Kamen Rider. Number 18 is Kamen Rider Ex-Aid, the movie True Ending. Taking place after the series, this is a story about an evil ninja rider from the VR world who is attempting to conquer Earth. Him and his ninja minions attack civilians with shurikens, and we come to find out that this evil ninja rider is working with a company called Machina Vision, who is targeting a sick young girl to be the subject of their game, as sort of an evil experiment. To be honest with you, the story is a bit strange, but it has a ton of heart, and all of the riders that you would expect are here. And if you like Ex-Aid, it's more Ex-Aid, so what could be wrong with that? Next up at number 17 is Kamen Rider Drive the movie, Surprise Future. After accidentally creating an explosion, Shinsuke, or Kamen Rider Drive, meets a man who is claiming to be his son from the year 2035, the future. His supposed son warns Shinsuke Belto-san's AI will go rogue and cause the Roidmude to overtake humanity. At the same time, Shinsuke is forced to deal with an evil Kamen Rider that has arrived named Kamen Rider Dark Drive, who also comes from the future, as Dark Drive creates destruction and causes Shinsuke to be blamed for it, making him a wanted man. There are things that happen in this movie, and Shinsuke pretty much gets the raw end of the deal. His allies try to stick up for him, but to no avail, and the entire police force is after him. There is a big twist here that I won't spoil, but suffice it to say, the things that make Drive great are also present here. Great character development, well shot and well choreographed action scenes, and excellent music. Also, Dark Drive looks pretty damn sick. Next at number 16 is Kamen Rider Cross Kamen Rider Fozit and Oz, Movie War Megamax. And holy damn, that's a mouthful. In this movie, while Eiji continues to search for a way to revive Ankh, an evil Kamen Rider from 40 years in the future shows up to cause chaos and make his life a living hell. And this new Kamen Rider is called Kamen Rider Poseidon. In the meantime, we have a Fozit adjacent storyline about Foundation X targeting the Solu, an alien life form that's currently in possession of Kamen Rider Fozit. This movie also features Double, making it a team-up of an excellent 3-year span of riders. And I have to say that the Kamen Rider Club in this movie really shines, as they cosplay as Showa-era riders. One sad note though, is this was the final live-action appearance of Philip from Kamen Rider Double, as Masaki Suda has not returned to the Kamen Rider franchise since this movie, and subsequent appearances would feature Rin Koriyama as Shotaro by himself. Number 15 is Decade, All Riders vs. Dai Shocker. In this film, Tsukasa travels to the world of Decade, and he discovers the true nature of his powers. This movie features all Heisei and Showa riders, as they square off with Dai Shocker, which is a conglomerate of classic villains from the franchise based in the world of Decade, even featuring Shadow Moon. In this movie's first week in Japanese theaters, it opened in the #1 spot, even edging out Harry Potter and Pokemon, and earning over 2 billion yen, which is about $21 million in the US. This made it the highest grossing Kamen Rider film at the box office, until the record was broken recently with Shin Kamen Rider in 2023, thusly making it the second highest grossing film in the history of the franchise. I know a lot of you guys like Decade, and if it's one of your go-to Kamen Rider series, then this film is a no-brainer. I really enjoy seeing the old villains, including Ambassador Hell, and of course Shadow Moon. And the final battle of this film is awesome. Number 14 is Heisei Riders vs. Showa Riders, Kamen Rider Taisen, featuring Super Sentai. Now, I would say that this movie is mostly about Gaim and Ichigo, but there are quite a few riders that are featured, as well as Tokuger and Kyoryu Red. The title can be a little bit misleading because it would make you think that there were a bunch of Super Sentai teams, but there's not, just Tokuger and Kyoryu Red. But it's still pretty cool to see a Sentai and Kamen Rider crossover, even though this wasn't the only time it happened. This movie starts out with an all-out brawl amongst the Kamen Riders from the different eras, even going so far as to have Kamen Rider J in his giant form smacking people around. It's discovered that this infighting is connected to the underground empire Badan, and Kamen Rider Ichigo, Takeshi Hongo, is trying to defeat Badan. Badan are using monsters from different Kamen Rider series and are trying to continue where Shocker left off. So clearly this is something that the writers cannot let happen. I find the interactions between Kamen Rider Ichigo and Kamen Rider Gaim to be thoroughly entertaining. Gaim is a very good and well-loved series, so to see Kota interact with Takeshi will tug on the heartstrings of fans. Because most of the time when we see Kamen Rider Ichigo in these movies, he's simply in his henshin form. But in this movie, he's actually unhenshined and interacting with Kota. Very, very cool. And if you're a longtime Kamen Rider fan, I definitely think you will enjoy this movie. Number 13 is Kamen Rider Zi-O, the movie, over Quartzer. In this movie, Sogo and his allies end up in 16th century Japan during the battle between Nobunaga and Katsuyori, as he seeks to prevent the disappearance of Kamen Rider Drive from history. Eventually, Waz reveals himself to be a member of a group called Kortser, which are time travelers. And we have a few revelations about Omagio that will make certain story aspects click into place and become much clearer. This movie features an early appearance of 01, which is strangely at the very beginning of the movie. And I know that Gio can be kind of divisive in the community, whereas some people love it and some people hate it. But if you like Gio, well, this movie is more of that, but it's also another Heisei era tribute as well as a tribute to Drive. As I've said on this channel many times, I am a Sengoku fanboy, so samurai and classical Japan are definitely some story elements that I can get behind. Number 12 is Heisei Generation's Final, which is a Build and Ex-Aid movie. This is a direct continuation of the ending of Ex-Aid True Ending, where we see Build being a thief, for lack of a better term. The riders have to take on Foundation X and the Nebula Bugster. This is yet another great crossover film, but one thing that's cool about this one, that might sound counterintuitive, is this movie only features a handful of writers. And while some of these other movies feature tons of writers that give you a moment to go, wow, it's that guy, I think the smaller cast size here gives each of these writers time to shine and room for the story to breathe a little bit. Not to mention, the interactions between Shinto and Imu are thoroughly entertaining, and I honestly think after watching this movie, you will probably end up liking both of them more. Next up is Kamen Rider Geats and Revice Movie Battle Royale. But one aspect of this movie that's not mentioned in the title is this is also the 20th anniversary project of Yuki. And as such, characters from all three shows are featured here. In this movie, the riders from different shows are gathered to compete in the Desire Royale. There's a lot of cat and mouse type antics between the riders of Geats and the riders of Revice, and of course we have the utter badasses featured on Yuki, making this one of the harder hitting films on this list. I especially appreciate Chubby Oja. You know, he looks like he's been eating donuts, thinking up ways to be evil over all these years. And as a huge Geats fan, I really like this movie. Next up at number 10 is Shin Kamen Rider. Now, I know that this movie can be somewhat divisive at times, but I saw this in the theater, and watching it with a bunch of Kamen Rider fans that had driven from miles away in order to watch it was an experience unlike any other. So call me biased, but I honestly love this movie. While it's not a completely true adaptation to the original, it is a very stylish love letter to the OG Kamen Rider, and they basically took story elements that were originally introduced over a long span of episodes into one film. With the costumes, the music, and the way the action is shot, it really shows how much the people who made this loved the original Kamen Rider. And to me, that goes a really long way. It has to be noted though, that this is not a movie to watch with young kids, as it is extremely bloody. In fact, within the first 10 minutes of the movie, we see Kamen Rider thoroughly decimating Shocker Goons, making their heads explode, throwing them against trees, with red spilling out all over the place. And yeah, if you enjoy some of the more violent Kamen Rider projects, like Black Sun, Amazon, or Amazons, then you'll probably dig it. Number 9 is Agito, the movie, Project G4. This movie focuses heavily on two kids with supernatural abilities, including precognition, who escaped from a military facility because of an attack by the Ant Lords. At the same time, a woman named Risa wants to use that power to enhance the newly made G4 system, which was based upon designs that were stolen from Ozawa. Kamen Rider G4 himself looks a hell of a lot like G3, but he is black and silver and is somewhat of a modernized version of G3. This is a great military-esque Kamen Rider film with very entertaining action and a mature vibe at that. One other cool thing to point out is that this movie features Hiroshi Fujioka, who played Takeshi Hongo as the Superintendent General. Number 8 is Heisei Generations Forever. In this movie, a boy who is obsessed with Kamen Rider meets an Imajin and is granted his wish of being able to meet riders in person. Suddenly, Heisei riders of the past begin to show up, while Gyo and Build join forces with these Heisei riders in order to stop an evil timejacker named Tid. As far as fan service goes, this is some of the best fan service I've ever seen in a Kamen Rider movie. And there's a lot of really cool, heartwarming things that you'll see here, like a father with his sons observing these Kamen Riders, and it really goes to show how this is a franchise that has the ability to affect both adults and children. You know, there are a lot of people that fell in love with this franchise as a young child and carried that love with them into adulthood and passed it on to their children. This is something that's pretty damn cool, if you ask me. This movie is a very worthy send-off of the Heisei generation, and you might even legit cheer at your TV screen after watching this movie. It's honestly pretty touching, with great action and loads of entertainment value. Next up is Kamen Rider and Kamen Rider Oz and Double, featuring Skull, Movie War Core. Another mouthful of a title, this movie features multiple sections, just like the other Movie War movies. Throughout this movie, Yu and Akiko are set to be married, but Akiko is upset that her father is unable to attend their wedding, and she wonders why he even became a Kamen Rider in the first place. Thanks to the help of a Yummy, she is able to see into the past and observe the answer to this question. This leads to the origin story of her father Sokichi as well as Shotaro, and it's pretty damn cool to see this angle of the story that we hadn't seen previously. The Oz section focuses on Kogami and Maki's research based around Oda Nobunaga, who is an ancient Japanese figure often called the Great Unifier of Japan. And he is personified by a mysterious man that calls himself Nobunaga, but there's clearly more to this guy than meets the eye. Eventually, they would team up, as is typical for these Movie War movies, but a team up of Oz and Double is about as good as it can get. We have the epic origin story of Kamen Rider Skull and Shotaro, and we have Akiko acting insane as usual, so what's not to love? Next up at number 6 is Kamen Rider 01, the movie, Real Time. Now the title here is actually quite fitting because throughout this movie we have a persistent countdown. This takes place 3 months after the series, where we find 01 and his allies fighting against a worldwide terrorist named S, who henshins into Kamen Rider Eden. S has a god complex, and says that if God created the world in 6 days, then he will destroy it in 60 minutes, with the intention of creating what he considers a paradise.
Eden, the Kamen Rider. The creator who charges forward believing in paradise.
S has thousands of followers due to a website called ThinkNet that on the surface appears to be an MMO game, but in reality it creates digital avatars of its users to go in line with destroying the world and replacing it with a digital utopia. These followers henshin into what are called Abaddon Riders. So pretty much anybody that has watched 01 and knows its story knows that the ending was kind of rushed due to the pandemic of 2020. I think this movie is Toei's effort to tell a cohesive story and give Aruto a quality ending. This movie isn't perfect, but the action is amazing. Some of the best action cinematography in any Kamen Rider films or series. I've seen a lot of people call this one Real Eyes, which is the name of the theme for the show, but it's called Real Time because it takes place in real time. Next up at number 5 is Kamen Rider Double Forever, A to Z The Gaia Memories of Fate. If you're a fan of Kamen Rider Double, you've likely seen this film already because it features one of the coolest evil riders of all time, Kamen Rider Eternal. In my opinion, this makes a better finale than the actual finale of the show, where we have Mitsuda Matsuoka, the singer of the Kamen Rider Drive theme song, guest starring as Kamen Rider Eternal, who leads a mercenary group called Never, and he is a more than worthy adversary to Double as he leads a ruthless assault on Futo City. As one of my viewers pointed out to me in the past, Futo is more than just a city, it is a character in and of itself. And throughout the show, there was so much detail and thought put into it to flesh it out and make us care about it, that when Eternal shows up to attempt to destroy the city, these are stakes that we actually care about. Like I said before, Eternal leads a group called Never, and the mercenaries that work underneath him are pretty unique from one another, and they use T2 memory sticks, making them quite powerful. There are a lot of forms here used, and this movie also features Oz in an early appearance. Next up at number 4 is Phi's Paradise Lost, which takes place in an alternate timeline from the show. Smart Brain has gained control of the entire world, and the human race is on the brink of extinction. The few remaining survivors consider Takumi to be the savior of humanity, until he is presumed dead. Mari forms a resistance group, and they fight against the Orphanox and try to obtain the Emperor belts. Meanwhile, Takumi is still alive, but living under a false identity in a camp called Paradise, until danger comes to his doorstep and he eventually remembers who he is and decides to fight.
After all, you're only human.
This feels like a legit Hollywood movie. Very post-apocalyptic. Basically, humanity is almost extinct. There are very, very few survivors, only a few hundred. So it feels pretty heavy, and you will find yourself rooting for Phi's quite a bit, because the deck was stacked against him so much. We have an Orphanoch named Leo, who speaks English throughout the movie, which is a little strange, but also cool, and he henshins into Kamen Rider Saiga, as well as Yuji henshing into Kamen Rider Orga, a very, very cool looking form, in my opinion, whose helmet almost resembles that of a Spartan. I think that if you have friends that aren't into Kamen Rider and you want to introduce them to it, this would probably be a good movie to show them because it's self-contained and it feels a lot more like a Hollywood movie than just a Kamen Rider film. Number 3 is Kabuto, Godspeed Love. This is a Kamen Rider 35th anniversary film, and it's set in an alternate timeline to the series. This movie shows us the origin of the meteor strike, and it evaporates the oceans of the Earth and turns the world into a desert wasteland. There are quite a few elements that are incongruent to the show, as this is a self-contained story, and it can be enjoyed even by those who haven't necessarily seen the show. Although, if you've seen the show, I think you'll get a lot more enjoyment from it. This movie is very emotionally weighty, and features some really cool new riders here, such as Kamen Rider Hercules, Ketoros, and Kakasu. In this movie, there is a large comet that is orbiting through space, and Zect decides to build a space station called Jacob's Ladder in order to capture it and supposedly spread its water throughout the Earth. Soji, also known as Kamen Rider Kabuto, intends to play Zect and Neo-Zect against each other for his own interests, and this is something that's very fitting for him as a character because he usually comes off as being the smartest guy in the room, kinda 2 steps ahead of everybody. Like I said, this story is very emotional and heavy, with a heavy emphasis on the relationship between Kagami and Hiyori. And I don't want to spoil anything, but there are things that happen in this movie that will hit you hard, and we actually see Soji lose it and get really upset and emotional, something that doesn't happen very often at all. It kind of goes to show that he's more than just the arrogant prick that he comes across as in the beginning of the series. This movie is epic, and it will tug on your heartstrings.
Sayonara. Build.
Next up at number 2 is Kamen Rider Build, the movie. Be the One. This is set 10 years after the show, and the newly appointed governors of Seto, Hokuto, and Toto now support each other in their mission to reunify Japan. But wouldn't you know it, they are secretly members of Iboruto's home clan known as the Blood Tribe, who have each weaseled their way into governmental power in order to take over the entire world. Because they see Build as a threat to their plans, they turn everybody against him, basically turning all of the population into zombies who seek him out in order to kill him. This film was dedicated to Daiichi Nobe, who was an Engine Bros suit actor who unfortunately passed away suddenly 2 months prior to this movie's release. And this movie is more Build, so what's not to love about that? This movie is very entertaining, and it's a really cool angle to see an entire city turn against one rider. This movie functions best as an extension of the show, but if you haven't seen it, you will probably still love this movie. But even with 20 entries, not everything can make this list, so here's a few honorable mentions for you guys. Shin Kamen Rider Prologue. This film celebrates the 20th anniversary of the franchise, and it was meant to attract fans of the original series that had grown into adults, hence the much more dark and violent tone. Shotaro Ishinomori originally planned for him to be called Kamen Rider Gaia, with the suit design more in line with the other Showa riders, but later on this was changed to Kamen Rider Shin, and he was given a much more biological and insect-like appearance. The next honorable mention is Kamen Rider Zeto, another 20th anniversary film, even though it was actually released in the 22nd anniversary. Matsuru Aso awakened inside of a cave from a coma to protect a boy named Hiroshi from a group called Neonoid. This was originally planned to continue into a full series, but that didn't happen due to issues with creative. And one of the coolest facts that I found about this movie is that a lot of the music would be repurposed into Juko B Fighter. Just a well-written, well-acted, and very entertaining film. And the next honorable mention is Hibiki and the Seven Senki. This movie is focused heavily on the war between the Makumo and the Oni, and there's a lot of really cool writers here. Hibiki the show was kind of a tale of two shows because of the staff firings, but this movie tells a fairly cohesive story with some really cool looking writers, and I found it very entertaining. And now, what I view as the #1 Kamen Rider film of all time, Kamen Rider O's 10th anniversary Core Medal of Resurrection. In 2021, 10 years after the events of the show, Ankh revives into a world that is very dark and dystopian. Ancient Oz has returned and has pushed humanity to the brink of extinction. Ankh meets up with Eiji and they form a resistance alongside Shintaro, Akira, and Hina, but everybody in the group can tell that Eiji is not who he seems. Ankh eventually is able to sense that Eiji has core metals inside of his body, and later on it's revealed that this is actually not Eiji, but a greed named Goda. Kogami then reveals that his foundation created new core metals using Eiji's desire for power, which gave birth to Goda. I'm going to try to avoid the spoilers for the end of this movie, but if you've seen it, you'll definitely know where I'm coming from with what I'm about to say. The end of this movie is almost perfect in my eyes. I got choked up again capping these clips to make this video, and it's just so emotionally weighty.
俺の願いだ。
バカか！なんでそんなことした？
We see the heartfelt and heavy conversation between Eiji and Ankh before they team up for their epic battle as Tajador Eternity, which I have to say is one of the coolest looking forms in Kamen Rider. Feel free to disagree, but damn, I think that it looks just incredible. As far as users of Rider powers, I think Eiji is about as good as it gets. You want to talk about a hero? Someone that's selfless, that's Eiji. And the end of this story is so fitting for his character that I can find very few faults in this film. The first half of the movie, you know, if you really want to nitpick, you could probably find some things that have room for improvement. But to me, the final act of this movie washes all of that away. And like I said before, the only time I've ever shed a tear while watching Kamen Rider was during this movie. So take that for what you will. But you know what, guys? Those are just my picks. And with so many Kamen Rider movies, I'm sure there'll be a few disagreements. So let me know what your favorite Kamen Rider movies are in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, it would mean a ton to me if you would smack the shit out of that like button. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time. Bye.